Hello, it's middle of the week hump day, shall we say. I'm Curtis Daly and welcome to Normal Islands Live. I'm joined by the incredible Helena NoJusticeMTG. How are we? I'm so happy you're back on the show. We're going to have a great show with you. Go on, tell me what's been happening.
I mean, I've been pretty good. I had a really great couple of streams. We read a very funny article over the weekend on stream too. Highly recommend the segment we put out about that. But more broadly, yeah, just been. I should tell you what I did do. I got 40% off a Chinese takeaway today, and my god, did it hit the spot.
You got 40% off.
Yeah.
Oh my god. You need to tell me a trick on that one. Now, obviously, I was in your stream last night. And for those not aware, Helena was streaming the BBC debates of Gorton and Denton. Of course, you had all the candidates on there, including Matt Goodwin's Reform, Hannah Spencer from the Greens. It was a good show, very fun. What's your verdict, actually, the debate? Who won? How do you think Hannah Spencer did?
Well, I thought the winner was ironically the Liberal Democrat, which is crazy to think, but essentially she's a local councillor from the area, so actually knew the local issues a lot better than people who are from different areas of Manchester, but also just talked big game in terms of the problems of buy-to-let landlords pricing young people in the area out of the market. And I think that whilst I thought Hannah was really good in the debate in terms of talking about energy nationalisation and how we can use green energy to be able to create new jobs, etc., and bring bills down to make things affordable. There's a kind of a bit of a misstep there in not talking enough about the Green Party's abolish landlords plan, a plan for a public developer to try and get more council housing to undercut those landlords and indeed to abolish landlords eventually overall, which the Lib Dem spokesperson was really good at being able to comment on.
Mm.
And I thought Matt Goodwin lost the debate purely because
Yeah, absolutely.
everything else was, I think that mass immigration is bad. Do you have any other policies? No, mass immigration.
It
I'm like,
was just, but it was like so scripted though, wasn't it? Everything to blame on immigration. We know the score of that one. And I think, yeah, Hannah probably could have had a better answer on housing. But to be honest, I don't know how many people really tune into these debates. I don't think these things are going to make the difference. I think it's going to be like turnout, who can get their activists to door knock. I
that's
I think
exactly
that's what's
right.
going to win it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like these things, like people try and claim that elections nowadays they're won on TikTok and Instagram. Nope, they're won on the doorstep, just like any election.
Mm. Anyway, we probably should get on with the show. We've got coming up for you tonight. We've got Reform, Richard Tice, anyway, talking about cutting the minimum wage. Restore says you must be a Christian to be British, and new polling that's come out, which is very, very good news for the Greens. You can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. Now, of course, I'm a little bit under the weather, by the way. So I think it's kind of a nice and light show. I think maybe me being under the weather sort of helps my choices of the story. So they're not too heavy. I think it's quite a light show. But let's get on with our first story. Reform UK have hinted at the idea that they may cut the national minimum wage.
If you were in government, says, would reform cut the minimum wage for young people to get more of them into work? Is that on the table?
Well, we'll be talking about that over the coming weeks. We've got to really look at it because the evidence is immediately there within a matter of 6 to 9 months that this has had a catastrophic impact, as well, of course, of the impact of national insurance contribution rises, employment rights, fears from the dreadful employment rights bill. All of these things have a cumulative impact, right, which means that employers are saying,
but just to be very clear on that specific point, a potential pay cut for millions of young workers on the minimum wage is something you are considering.
If you're unemployed, I mean, 100% of nothing is nothing.
No, but we're talking specifically about the minimum wage here and whether it needs to be cut for young people.
But the wage is irrelevant if you're not employed.
Yeah, but the young
businesses are not employing you, so it's much better to say, actually,
yes. But the young people who are employed on the minimum wage obviously would also be affected by a cut in the minimum wage.
And that's why I'm not going to make policy on the hoof. That's why you've got to look at the implications of this.
But you're looking at it.
We've got to look at all of this because they've got themselves in a terrible pickle, and sometimes it's then quite hard to unwind these things.
And to young people who say, well, I'm in work, I'm earning the minimum wage, why on earth would I vote reform if they think I should potentially earn even less than I'm getting? What would you say?
Well, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is other young people are not being employed who could be and should be because of this extra cost, and it's a significant disadvantage.
I mean, 100% of nothing is nothing. He's a plonker, isn't he? I mean, yes, obviously, technically, if you're not working, then a wage cut will be nothing to you, but it's not the point, is it? Of course, if you're already working, you're cutting a minimum wage. And even if you're not working, you don't have a job, like who would support cutting the minimum wage? Now, the current minimum wage is, well, it's different bands, but 21 and over is £12.21. The ages of 18 to 20, it's £10 an hour. But under 18s, it's £7.55. That's really low. And to be honest, look, we're nothing like the US. In America, the minimum wage is $7.25, I believe. And that hasn't gone up in like 20 years. I'm very happy that for all our faults of this political system we live in, successive governments have at least raised the wages every single year. And £12.21, I don't think it's high enough. Like, I think the minimum wage should be the living wage. It's probably around £15 an hour. But £12.21 isn't horrifically bad. £7.55, though, is very bad. So I think it's needing of an update. But the conversation around minimum wage has surfaced due to youth unemployment. So unemployment for those aged 16 to 25 rose to 16.1%. Now, if you look at the graph the BBC's provided, its unemployment for youth was 15%. That was in December 2020, it's around the sort of COVID period. After lockdown, you can see a real dip in unemployment. That makes sense. I feel like there's that sense of everyone just going out there. There was sort of, business was kind of booming again, shall we? Or at least, was coming out of a lockdown. But over the years, you've seen it creep back up, and it's now at its highest for 10 years. So youth unemployment is a problem. But the Bank of England has once again suggested wages are too high. Some economists believe that easing pay growth could make the Bank of England more likely to cut interest rates at its next meeting in March. The bank uses interest rates as a tool to cool inflation, the rate at which prices rise, which is currently at 3.4%, above the 2% target set for by the government. Paul Dales, chief UK economist at Capital Economics, said the fall in wage growth supports the idea that the Bank of England has at least a couple more interest rate cuts in its locker. They are once again running on the assumption that wages are the cause of inflation, with the Bank of England suggesting wages are too high. I mean, when you do that, you just think people can never get ahead. And the problem with using only monetary policy to control inflation is that reducing it can also lead to unemployment as, of course, demand in the economy falls. And that is the big problem I have with classical macroeconomics, is that they are short-term fixes, which they may not even, fix the problem short-term anyway. So cutting wages to boost sort of employment, sorry, again, under the weather. Cutting wages to boost employment is a simplistic idea, as it ignores the fact that lower wages means less purchasing power, which in turn means people spend less and businesses cut jobs. It's a constant cat and mouse chase. But as of today, inflation has dropped. Inflation is down to 3% now. This is due to a fall in petrol, food and airfares, which has contributed to the fall. And it's widely accepted that interest rates will be cut. So why the need for the minimum wage to be frozen or reduced? I mean, we should, in a way, view wages as a form of tax for businesses insofar that, of course, yes, reducing wages and cutting taxes is going to boost profits for businesses. Of course, that's going to happen, right? But of course, it's a poor way of boosting the prospects of businesses because it's not a long-term plan. And when you hear right-wing politicians blame taxes stifling growth, it doesn't look at the bigger picture. And the same is for wages. It's the same argument. No one is looking at the economy in a holistic way. Bills and, more importantly, rents. These burdens, they fall on the individual. and also on businesses. And you think actually when rents are high, when energy or bills are high, for business owners, like small business and medium-sized businesses, they're kind of getting a double whammy because their own personal bills are going up and then they have to pay higher bills through their businesses. So when right-wing politicians only focus on tax, it doesn't really get to the heart of the issue. And you also don't want to look at wages because we should be boosting wages in this country, not reducing them. Now, recently, Ben McLean appeared on GB News and made sure to mention that Reform want to cut the minimum wage, only to be told that he was wrong by his debate opponent, Jack Anderton.
They can pretty much switch on to any mainstream media channel and hear the dry views of reform being repeated again and again ad nauseum. Like, they don't want to platform a party that wants to cut the minimum wage for young workers. You know, they don't like you. Get over it. It's not a free speech issue.
Well, it seems Ben had Jack banged to rights. Now, Reform do not care about the young. Now, the government initially proposed the idea of wage parity across all ages. Good, but now they may U-turn on the policy. Another good policy potentially facing the scrap. Reform say jump, Labour say how high? Helena, what's your response to Richard Tice's suggestion, or at least hinting, on cutting the minimum wage?
Well, it's just yet another policy to add to the ever-increasing pile for reform, which panders to their voter base, i.e. lots of retired people, rather than people who will never vote for them, which is young people. I mean, you'd have thought after the last 15 years, where the Conservative Party at this point in time is basically facing near extinction because they can't actually generate a voter base of people under the age of 60. In fact, if you look at polls at the moment, the party that's polling first amongst under 65s is the Green Party. You think Reform would want to have a policy prospectus that at least tries to appeal to young people, and yet they are clearly just assuming that this entire generation, this entire demographic, is a total write-off for their future potential voter base. But can you really be surprised when somebody as short-termist as Robert Jenrick is outwriting their policy, or people like Richard Tice? You would have thought, given that they've already engaged in the short-termism to get to this point, that it is not too much of a reach for them to extend it further into how they set policy rather than how they carry themselves as politicians. Now, I want to have a couple of things in terms of the economics of this. Now, there is lots of studies done by a really great labour economist called Arindrajit Dubey. There's a lot of work looking at the impact of minimum wage rises on things such as disemployment. Because the big story here really is this idea that youth unemployment is being caused by the fact that young people are not employable if they get paid the same rate as everybody else because they don't have the level of experience that other people do. And there are, of course, many solutions to this issue, making it so that they just undercut everybody else, which will essentially just drive down standards across the board. Anyway, it's pointless. Second of all, what you can do is you can have a job guarantee. Now, the government have been pretty sneaky. They have a thing called the youth guarantee, but what it is workfare. The youth guarantee the current government are coming out with is essentially forcing people who are young, who are on welfare, to do work or lose their welfare payments. What a job guarantee is for is a way of being able to provide people the option, if they wish to do so, of being employed by the state. And by doing that, they'll get access to the experience they need to get themselves into the labour market, and it will reduce unemployment too, and create a buffer of jobs to be able to push up wages from in terms of the labour market more broadly. If you have what is known as the non-accelerating inflation buffer employment ratio, if my MMT is being remembered correctly here, in terms of essentially a employer of last resort from the state, it's a really good way of shutting down employment, and it forces people in the private sector to have to essentially negotiate with workers on the grounds that they have an alternative waiting for them, rather than the alternative being be on the scrap heap, be on unemployment. It puts the power back into hands of workers against employers, whilst filling a bunch of employment gaps that we might need in, for example, in construction, as well as giving them the training that a lot of people in the private sector don't want to do at time of recording, and makes them better equipped to be able to deal with the labour market later on when they go to try and work in the private sector again. That would be my personal solution to the youth unemployment issue, because whilst unemployment has slightly increased up to 5.2% recently for the entire population, and I think the increases on national insurance for employers probably does have at least somewhat to do with that, if you look at kind of the supply-demand curve, it is also worth pointing out we are on the other end of the business cycle. We are coming out of a hot economy. There's a reason why wages have been rising faster than inflation inflation for the past 2 years, and that's because of the hot economy, given all the money that's been put in post-pandemic. That's tailing off now, and as the business cycle will demand, that means that once the inflationary period ends, the wage rises will also end and unemployment will increase. That's what is happening right now. And it's nothing necessarily to do with party policy. But when it comes to youth unemployment, I think we're seeing real problems in terms of hiring in this country, real problems in terms of skills shortages for young people too, because the government isn't taking an active role in shaping the skills that they're offering to young people to make them adaptable for a modern labor market. And those problems can be solved through state intervention. We do not need to start cutting people's wages to make them more easily employable by the private sector. And by employable, I mean exploitable. Because if you're paying somebody below what is currently a living wage, then you're essentially saying you don't work hard enough to deserve getting paid enough to survive. And no employer should be in the position where they're allowed to do that. The last point I'll make before we move on is that I personally don't like minimum wage laws. I don't think you necessarily need a minimum wage law. What you do need is collective bargaining. What you need to do is, rather than setting everything from an arbitrary level in terms of what the basic wage floor is, even if I'm not necessarily broadly opposed to that, if you had powerful trade unions with high levels of subscription, where the wage setting model is between consortia of employers and unions that represent those sectors, that creates a better deal for workers. It gets employers on board without it being imposed by the state. And it's more of a way of empowering workers to make those decisions themselves, and leads to better economies with better levels of employment, as we're seeing in countries like Denmark and Sweden and Norway. Denmark itself has 10 points higher labour force participation than we do, despite the fact their average wage is higher. Average purchasing power is higher. They don't have a minimum wage, but they have very, very strong union protections that creates a higher wage floor than our arbitrarily different to how our arbitrarily applied minimum wage does in the UK.
They also have higher welfare spending as well. So when people try and make that correlation between, oh, we got really high benefits of employment, it's crap. I know that Stephanie Kelton also popularizes, I mean, she calls it a federal jobs guarantee. She's American. I absolutely love this policy. I happen to think it actually revolutionizes the economy. And to put it in simple terms, I kind of like using the analogy of like healthcare. So in America, obviously doesn't have state healthcare. They have private healthcare. It's very exploitative. It's very expensive. And there's no one undermining the private sector to provide cheaper healthcare. And even though I think they should have a Medicare for all, that's what they could. A Medicare for all, even a public option would do, I think, a lot of work to undermine the private sector, make things cheaper. And why aren't we doing that with jobs? Why isn't the state coming in and said, do you know what? There is a guaranteed job for you. And what's your skills? Oh, I'm a software engineer. Well, we need loads of those. You're going to get a decent wage. It's going to be great benefits. You're going to get time off for holiday. And then the private sector are going to be like, well, we need people. We're going to try and bid up labor. And now we're bidding down. So I absolutely love that. I think it's a policy that all socialists or even social democrats should support. You're a Green Party member. Is there anything like that in the Green Manifesto? Or has there been discussions around that?
I'm not aware so far. I'll have to check out the current prioritization ballot coming up for Green Party Spring Conference. If you're a member and you've not done your prioritization, that's your reminder to do that. As for what it looks like in terms of policy, I am not well read up enough on a bunch of our labour market policy to know. But if it's not, it certainly should be. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. Let's move on though, because it's getting to 8 o'clock. We've got another 2 stories to get through. It's about Rupert Lowe. Now, after Rupert Lowe launched his new party, Restore, it has been doing the media rounds, particularly on the right. Charlie Downs, spokesperson for the party, made the bizarre claim that you can't be British if you're a Christian.
If Britain's a people and a nation, well, that to me sounds like saying Britain is being sentimentally attached to the country. Britain is living here. It's being brought up here. It's being, you know, what do you mean that's different to Reform UK? I need to understand this. Make it clear. Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Well, Reform's position from their very beginning has been no different to Blair's position, to Cameron's position, which is that Britishness is defined by adherence to British values. This is a term that I have been hearing for my entire life. It was something that I was taught when I was in primary and secondary school, that's what it means to be British. And if you look at the law, British values are defined as democracy, tolerance, the rule of law, and mutual respect and tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs. Now, that, in my view, is nothing at all to do with what it means to be British, because the majority of British people throughout our 1,000-year history have not believed in these values. These are a creation of the Blairite state over the last.
So what is it to be? So explain to me, what is it that you're saying makes someone British that is different to what they're saying?
Well, it's a far deeper thing than that, Alex. It's about a connection to this land. It's about an ancestry here.
Okay, but connection to land, isn't that what Matt Goodwin said to you, though?
Please let me finish here. More than anything, it is Christian faith. It is ancestry and it's Christian faith.
So if you're not a Christian, you can't be British?
Well, I mean, you are certainly, I think, less British if you're not a believer in Christian principles. If somebody was Islamic, then they are certainly less British, yeah.
If someone was Islamic, it's giving that Muslimic thing. Oh, God. I mean, look, at the end there, he says you're less British. He doesn't say the words, you can't be British if you're not a Christian, right? But what does it mean being less or more British? I think we can go ahead and take it as him meaning not British. Now, electorally, I don't think Restore are going to be a successful party. I mean, no one knows who Rupert Lowe is. They are far too extreme for the British public. However, they certainly can be influential on the political conversation. I mean, they're doing that right now. Ash Sarkar and Charlie Downs had this exchange on Twitter. Bad news if you're white, British and of no faith. According to this new political party, not even you are actually British. And Charlie Downs responds by saying, Britain is and has always been a Christian country, Ash. You don't have to personally practice the faith to recognise that it is fundamental to our identity as a people. A native Brit who converts to Islam is absolutely less British than a native Brit who is a Christian. I mean, we are going to obviously react to these comments in a second, but, you know, those on the far right really don't know their history, and frankly, they don't know what they're talking about. Far-right activist Jess Gill said this: it should be common sense that you need British ancestry to be British. Why is this controversial? I mean, it's controversial because Britain or Britishness isn't an ethnicity. You can't have British blood. It's not in your DNA. I mean, my brain cells are quite literally disappearing as I read it. Now, this is the same Gill who recently attacked the Windrush generation. Britain never asked the Windrush generation to come here. They were never invited from the start. And Britain wasn't rebuilt by immigrants after World War II. British people rebuilt Britain. When will we stop believing this propaganda? I mean, we literally asked them to come over. We gave them visas. We asked them. And by the way, those countries weren't asked to be colonized by Britain either. Now, look, it's really important to know that these people are, frankly, ethno-nationalists. They want Britain to be for white people. Now, I can hear so many people respond to me saying, you're just being hyperbolic. You know, this is the far left calling everyone they disagree with as racists and fascists. You know, find me a single quote where they say they want whites only. But this completely misunderstands politics and political messaging. People don't openly admit their raw opinions, right? It's hidden by dog whistles and coded language. I mean, if Rupert Lowe said, you know, England or Britain should be whites only, he would get nowhere, right? Read between the lines. So why do I believe that these people are ethno-nationalists? Because of the amount of qualifiers to be seen as British. I mean, sure, they're not saying you have to be white to be British, because they don't have to. Now, to be British is to be born here or have a British passport. And I know the far right moan and they cry, but it's a fact. But they want to redefine Britishness, add so many caveats until you whittle it down to essentially just white people. And to be honest, to these people, Christianity is seen as a white religion. You know, if that's now a qualifier of being British, the odds would favour white people. It's a way of circumventing the phrase white people, even though that's what they mean. So to say one is British if they, excuse me. So to say if one is British, if they are a Christian, they have ancestry here, that box is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Then they'll add more qualifiers. okay, it has to be ancestry that goes back 1,000 years. We'll reach a point where the only people you could be possibly talking about are white people. And once that becomes the basis of Britishness, then anyone else can be deported. Whilst also claiming, hey, look, we're not deporting people based on their skin colour. We're deporting people based on their Britishness and their values. Yet it's basically anyone not white. Now, look, we're not there yet, by the way, but that is what people want, or these people want anyway. But as I mentioned, these people on the far right do not know the history. This is where Christianity originates from. Christianity originated in the 1st century AD in the Roman province of Judea as a Jewish sect. It grew from the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, centered on his ministry, crucifixion, and reported resurrection. The movement spread from Jerusalem throughout the Mediterranean and the Roman Empire. So Christianity originated in the Middle East. I mean, does being born in the Middle East make you more British? I mean, I bet those people wouldn't like that one. Look, ultimately, we are a secular nation. Parliamentarians, lawyers, and the High Court, or most of them anyway, the High Court rule and judge based on logic, not on theocracy. We do not want to be ruled by the Bible. Helena, do you agree with me that this is a fundamentally white nationalist movement dressed up in dog whistles?
I mean, I think you're right. I will caveat what you're saying, though. We are technically still a Christian country. We still have an established religion in this country. We shouldn't have one because it's basically meaningless to the lives of most people now, as we're one of the least religious countries in the world, certainly one of the least religious countries in Europe. And so the idea that somehow the 75% of non-believers, which make up young adults in this country, are somehow less British than their parents or their parents' generation due to their lack of Christian religion is just totally nonsensical. But you're right, they're not doing this to try and delineate between those who subscribe to a certain set of values and those that don't. They're using this, as you say, as a dog whistle, and not even necessarily between certain colors of skin, but by geopolitics, right? This is about West versus East, the Judeo-Christian West versus the Islamic East. It's the new kind of Cold War era dichotomy of the first and second world that they're moving into with this rhetoric. This is why they define themselves so heavily against Islam, not necessarily because they have personal beliefs in Christianity. I believe a lot of them really don't. You see a lot of these people treat it like cultural Christianity because they can't really defend it in religious terms when so many people they're trying to convince don't have any honest belief in God anymore at all. But they use it as a dog whistle of trying to be able to distance themselves and juxtapose themselves versus countries from the Islamic world as part of their geopolitics, right? Again, it's why they support Israel so much, not only because it represents the kind of model ethno-state that they wish to be able to emulate, but it's their bulwark against the East with which they define themselves against. It's also quite Yankified, it's quite Americanized, this politics, despite the fact that theirs is a country which has no established religion. It's a far more the US is a country with a higher level of religiosity than we do, and in terms of the values that it represents, both politically and in terms of culturally, is far more Christian than we are. I was looking at some really interesting research the other day. It actually came up on my feed, totally out of the blue, but I looked into it because I was really, really curious. And it showed that religiosity falls so far in the United Kingdom compared to countries like the United States, because so much of our educational system is set up, as you say, to prioritize empiricism and logic and reason, a more humanist worldview. That's basically what our education system prioritizes now, especially given our country is what it is today, not because of historical Christian values, but because of the fact that we were one of the kind of cradles of the Enlightenment, the rejection of theocratic Christian values and the replacement with Enlightenment values is why we became the country we are today. It's why we became a powerful country. It's why we became a country with the kind of civic setup that we have today, the constitutional setup we have today, because of those Enlightenment values. And that is what is created through the development of a humanistic education system, a population that has very, very low levels of religiosity, and it's sticky. Generations are becoming less religious over time. And what's interesting is that a lot of the right wing try and say we can have the Islamification of Britain by having people come here with Islamic values. Well, the research and the information and the data that we have shows it's also the children of Muslim parents who are also getting less religious over time. And I think the education system is partly to blame for this. So I say blame because that sounds like a bad thing, but it's partly the contributing factor into this, because if you teach people to be able to reason themselves into an empirical conclusion, you don't need the kind of teleological thinking, the idea that things have a purpose behind them, to be able to understand why they exist in the way that they do. So Christian values it's not British, and that we're the great country we are today in certain respects in terms of what we're able to build for century after century, because we put the religious feelings to one side and embraced Enlightenment thought. That is what I think of when I think of the really good things that Britain represents, is the fact that we are an intellectual powerhouse in terms of what our history has given us. And those intellectuals were mostly not doing it through Christian theology, I can tell you that.
I mean, I still actually argue we're a secular nation. I completely get what you're saying. Like, we have a national religion, which is Christianity, but I still publicly say, do you know what? No, we are secular, because the way in which you practically govern, maybe it's sort of, semantics on that point. I think what's really interesting, and you pointed it, you brought it up there, which is the way that which the right wing are trying to create a religious war again. They want to go back to sort of the Crusades. Part of that is that weird fetishness of the Crusades. You see these weird AI images of the Crusades, and you've got like pictures of Rupert Lowe as a knight. Really weird stuff. You got another bit, which is a more top-down, well-funded political machine, which you can put in Tommy Robinson there, other far-right actors in there. And it's about, let's be honest, you can bring it back to Israel. There's an incentive for the Zionist project in Israel to make this a religious war. It's Judeo-Christian values versus Islam and Muslims. When, of course, what's happening in Israel-Palestine is geopolitics and colonialism. But they want to make it a religious thing. And that's why Tommy Robinson, with his Islamophobia and attacks on Muslims, is really helpful to them. But I think ultimately this does come down to whiteness. And I think it is funny when people say, show me a single quote where Rupert Lowe was racist. And it's like, that's not how it works. Now, people, shit their bricks when we make comparisons to the Holocaust, right? I'm not saying if Rupert Lowe was Prime Minister, he would gas people. But what I am saying is when you look at like Nazi Germany and look at Hitler's speeches, the first thing he said wasn't kill all Jews. It was a lot of dog whistles up until that point. Groom the people in order to push their political views. Again, I'm not saying reform or restore are the new Nazis, but what I am saying is usually people don't go whites only first. And I can attest to that because as a radical leftist, right, when I go on public platforms, I'll say we need to have a wealth tax. And it'll be, and the Green Party policy, I think, is 2% wealth tax on X amount of money, like 10 million pounds or more. And to me, reality, that policy will do absolutely nothing. That won't change the game in any way. But I know that, but it's about understanding. I can't go on TV and say we need to basically get the guillotines out and we need to have 100% tax. I obviously can't say that, right? But I can try and push that over to the window, and the Greens can do that, for example. So I can admittedly say my politics are more radical than how I am when I try to meet people where they are. 2% wealth tax to me is nothing. I want to abolish billionaires. In fact, I want a wage cap. But I can't say that. So if we look at right-wingers and they'll use dog whistles, do you think that's the most radical they are? No, they're holding back. There's always more radicalism. I really want to get into this conversation, but we were a bit late and it's already 8:15, so I apologise. Do you want to come in for a final point then before we move on?
I think what I'll finalise with here is that I'm really sick of right-wingers implying that somehow Britain as a polity should stay the same forever, as if the values are eternal and they should never change, the ethnic makeup should never change, the culture should never change, and we should essentially create a time bubble of 1963 and then have that forever maintained by social engineering from the state. No, culture changes, language changes, societies change, whole social prescriptions and social contracts change over time. You cannot convince me that one from a previous era is better just through traditionalism alone. You should have to demonstrate that to me, again, through empiricism, through some kind of logical or moral paradigm, as to why yours is better than mine, which could be a future one that is different or similar to what we have now, or similar or different to one from the past. But you cannot tell me that somehow things were better back then because they just were, and things are worse now, as if, oh well, our communities have changed and this makes me scared. I'm like, do you think that in the 1950s it was similar to the 1920s? No, and the same was different to the 1980s and different to what it is today. Things will change over time, and I have literally zero time, I have zero concern for the people who want to be able to arrest that through forcing it to stop changing because they dislike the idea of societal entropy. Because part of growing up and maturing is understanding that things will not be the same forever.
Yeah, did you see the campaign video from Restore? It was just basically, it wasn't the 60s, but it was like footage from the 90s, or I think it was like AI generated. Pure nostalgia slot, wasn't it? And the thing with religion as well, it's all about, you know, I used to be like a new atheist, so I used to, when I was younger, always watch the Richard Dawkins dunks on this person, right? And part of it was true, though, in the sense that religion and religiosity, and a lot of people who push their religious ideas believed in an objective morality, like nothing can change, everything must stay the same. But morality is relative, because how is it not? I mean, what we did 100 years ago is not what we do today. We used to have slavery. We used to outlaw gay marriage, for example. And we should understand that morality is relative. And I think it kind of links in with that. Everything must stay the same. Nothing can change. We don't want that. God, this is. I don't usually talk about like theocracy and stuff on this show. I could talk about it longer, but I am going to move on to get to our final story. Before we do that, though, of course, it's 2026, and we really want this year to be big for Turn Left. We want to be far more ambitious than last year, and to really put us on the map. We would like 2026 to be the year where we can have a studio, and for our contributors to be paid for the work we do. Your support over the years has been truly incredible, and we are ready to take this to the next level. We rely on small donations, so if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnedleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly via Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. Of course, you can also become a member on YouTube for 99p. Now, for those that don't know, tomorrow night we will release our first ever mini documentary. It follows Green Party candidate Hannah Spencer around the Gorton and Denton constituency as she fights for a seat in Parliament. We also have another exclusive clip.
Hannah's dying to eat.
I'm starving. Beans on toast?
Shall I see if they've got
beans
a vegan
on toast. Or maybe what's vegan? I don't know. I could just have beans. I'll just have beans on toast. Does anyone else want anything to eat? You've ordered. Anything to eat? Anything to eat? I'm going to get some beans on toast.
I don't think it's hyperbole to say it's a battle for the soul of our nation. Like, this by-election will be one of the most important turning points, I think, of this Parliament. Because actually, when you look at all the moving parts, I'm going to caveat here by saying, obviously, this by-election is important for the people of Gorton and Denton. I think sometimes that gets missed with the media circus. But that caveat aside, I think it matters for the national picture.
Are you a plumber or a plasterer?
At the minute, I'm a plumber. I've been a plumber for a very long time, and I'm currently learning how to plaster. So I wouldn't say I'm quite both yet, because I've got a long way to go with my plastering, but I am definitely 100% a plumber.
So Wednesday and Thursday. Thursday morning? Got the whole morning locked out. And the Thursday.
You know the guy who came over and hugged me?
Yeah.
He was my old plumbing tutor, and I should have got them to talk to him. Okay, sorry, we have to go. We have to go. It's lovely to see you. Yeah, see you soon. I'll see you all. Yeah, see you very soon. Lovely to see you. You too. See you later.
I mean, do you think that Hannah Spencer likes beans on toast? By the way, that mini documentary drops tomorrow at 7 p.m. Please make sure you watch it. Our reporter Callum Taylor did so much work on this. He filmed it, he edited it. It's fantastic. So please make sure you tune in. That is tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Let's go on to our final story. A series of polls from YouGov has put the Green Party in a really, really good position. Now, What you're seeing here are a series of hypothetical tactical matchups based on who is most likely to win. When asked, imagine now that in your constituency, the only two parties that appeared to have a chance of winning were X and Y. If that were the case, how would you vote? Now, for the Greens, the numbers are as follows. If it's Green versus Reform, it's 42% on the side of the Greens versus 27% for Reform. Huge. Greens versus Conservatives, the Greens on 37% and the Conservatives all the way behind on 29%. Greens versus Labour, the parties who are vying for the same voters, 30% of people would choose the Greens versus just 20% for Labour. The Greens are seemingly far more popular than Reform. Again, 42% to 27% is huge. Yet this is the national polling. Reform is still significantly ahead on 24%. The Greens are fourth place on 17%. Now, the Greens have gained 1% since YouGov last conducted their poll, whilst Reform have dropped 3 points. Now, YouGov continues to show momentum for the Greens, whilst Reform either stagnates or loses support. However, there's this new poll, which is once again very good news for the Green Party. Never mind the Greens polling first place with 18 to 49-year-olds, they now take the lead with 18 to 65-year-olds. And look at the huge age divide. You've got 65 and over, and there's a dramatic increase in support for Reform and the Tories, with the Greens just on 3%. Helena, what's going on here? I mean, you've got the Greens who are polling number one with those aged 18 to 65. They seemingly are far more popular than Reform in head-to-head matchups, but they're still significantly behind Reform in voting intentions. Is this Labour splitting the vote, or is there more to it?
I think it is Labour splitting the vote, but I think the reason why we're seeing this is that there hasn't been a national scale election or electoral test for the Green Party that can show people more broadly that they are a serious electoral force, right? There is essentially a large amount of this polling, as far as I can see, has come from the broader, more populist view that the Greens have taken that's won people over through the advocacy that's been done by the Green Party, not just on social media, but on mainstream media as well. You've had Green Party figures such as Caroline Lucas on Newsnight last night, or Zach's many appearances on Question Time to be able to increase the Green Party's national profile. And that has come off of a large outreach program that's been done on social media as well, both by the leadership and by the membership. But when it comes to voting intention polls, people are actually saying, who would I vote for in a Westminster election? And most people look at the Greens, go, I'd like to vote for them, but I don't want to split the vote. I'd like to vote for them, but the Labour Party are the assumed tactical vote because they are currently the incumbent. And until they are, it's in a big electoral test to show people that actually that the Labour Party are the ones splitting the vote, and it is the Greens are the ones who are best placed to be able to beat Reform, people won't know whether that is true or not. Luckily enough, we have not one but two electoral tests coming up to be able to show the Green Party's mettle in taking the fight to Reform and being the party that polls closest to them outside of the Labour Party, in the form of the Gorton and Denton by-election. Of course, you have your documentary coming up about in future for the Green Party. And there are the set of local elections, which are now all going ahead, thanks to the government's humiliating U-turn on this issue, coming up in May as well. We saw in May last year where Reform was seen as a protest party. They weren't seen as a natural party of opposition. They weren't seen as being serious compared to the Conservatives as the official opposition, until an electoral test where people felt free to vote for Reform showed them that that's not the case. And they won every single council that the Tories were defending. The Tories were defending about 14 councils, I believe. They lost all of them, almost all to Reform as well. And it was that point of inflection that showed that Reform were a real party and not a protest party, that saw their vote shoot up. You can look at the graph of where the polls go, the poll of polls, the aggregate, over time, and you'll see it's literally just after those May elections where Reform starts sweeping through to a much higher level than they were previously, because people looked at it and went, well, I'm now no longer voting as a protest. I'm voting for a party that can win and shown that it can win. So if the Green Party want to be an assumed potential vote for the next Westminster elections, it has to show the population that it can't just run, but it can also win those seats. And so that's why it's really important that the Greens treat these next set of local elections and this Gorton and Denton by-election, but especially the local elections, as the last set of important elections before 2029. There will not be a single set of locals with as many Labour defences as this one now. And if Greens start taking seats off of Labour, it will create that same effect that Reform showed before too. Other thing that was interesting in this data also was the big generational gap.
Yeah.
And whilst I think we all understand why that is in terms of the kind of politics that these people represent, this isn't new. If you looked at the 2017 and 2019 elections, Corbyn would have had an outright majority if only under 65s had voted, probably would have had 400 seats. Keir Starmer or Tony Blair style, if it was only working age people who voted in that election, but that it was the older generations that stopped Corbyn from being PM. That dynamic hasn't changed. But what I want to talk about is the individual way in which people look at class in relation to this. Like, there's a really great article by Anushka Kellyan in the New Statesman yesterday, talking about how our definitions of working class have changed. And in the minds of the media, working class is about industrial versus service. There are working class industrialists and middle class service sector workers. But in 2026, most people work in the service sector. The modern working class is mostly people working in retail, working in call centers, working in menial minimum wage data entry jobs, all those kinds of things. And that's what a lot of young people make up, even though the older generations mostly made up manual workers before we deindustrialized. So people will look at these data going, older people voting for Reform, younger people voting for the Greens, and go, well, this is working class versus middle class. Well, in reality, what it actually is a relationship to production that is actually material in terms of the workers who do the work. The working age people want to vote for the Green Party in this country, and people who rely on the state pension broadly are voting for Reform and the Conservatives. Of course, this is a broader demographic idea. This isn't me saying that all boomers are right wing or all young people are left wing. Clearly, the polls show that is not the case. But these are broader trends shown, which is why Reform is saying no more work from home, cutting the wages for the working age people, but they're not saying cut the triple lock. They're not saying that they would change the amount of welfare that the retired get, which is what Labour found when they tried to means test the winter fuel allowance. Reform knows where their voter base is, and it's mostly older people.
It's the Maurice Glassman, like blue Labour definition of class. The industrial towns and manual work, and because he famously hates the term precariat. But I mean, it's all vibes based, and then the media love to do that. They think class is vibes based. It's like these sorts of people think that Jeremy Clarkson is either more working class or at least in touch with the working class because he drinks a pint and he goes on a farm than some blue head avocado on toast eating person, despite the fact that this person has just left university, shitload of debt, and has a 4-hour job at Topshop. So it is once again going back to Marxist class analysis, which is obviously not seen across the media. What I find interesting is that poll, the first poll, the Greens versus Reform. 42% say Green, 27% say Reform. The way I'm reading it, and I wonder if you read it the same, is that there is more voter migration between Labour and the Greens, insofar that Labour voters will happily get behind the Greens to stop Reform. Whereas the Conservatives and Reform, where, okay, all the voters came from the Conservatives and went to Reform, it seems like these people are settled there and they're not willing to go back to the Conservatives, even if it will stop the left, because the Conservatives are not seeing a big poll boost to stop the left. Is that the way you're seeing it? And it feels like Reform voters are absolutely done with the Tories, despite the fact that half of them are in the Reform Party. Whereas Labour voters, of course, they're continually moving to the Greens anyway. But they will happily back the Greens to stop Reform.
Yeah, 100%. Luke Trill from More in Common was analysing it in a very similar way, and I think I agree with you both here. The migrations we're seeing in terms of party affiliation haven't been between voter blocks, it's been within voter blocks.
Yeah.
There's a broad, like, anti-Tory, anti-Reform voting block and a broadly anti-Labour voting block. People move within those, although it does appear to be the case that you're more likely to see tactical voting from those in the left-coded block than you are seeing from the right-wing one, because again, the Tories have the stench of failure. People have migrated from Tory to Reform because they recognise the Conservative Party as being the ones who caused the budget crash in 2022 that nuked people's mortgages and people's pensions, and they're the party that let in 1 million people in terms of migration in 2022, and they find those sins unforgivable. Whereas I think that the spectrum of people who find the sins of the Labour Party unforgivable is quite small. I mean, I agree there are a lot of people who find Labour's position on Gaza, for example, unconscionable, and for people like you and myself, that means we're never voting Labour. But most people see Labour's failures in terms of disability cuts and policies that directly affect them. And those aren't as big as sins in terms of how people would migrate between voter groups that they would never vote Labour even tactically than the ones that the Conservative Party have inflicted upon their own voter base. I'll finish by responding to the Morris Glassman thing as well, whilst we're here, which was the one thing that his analysis misses out is access to capital. In fact, the big thing that's different between younger and older generations is home ownership. It's the reason why the Tories lost so many voters, as I said before, was because mortgages went up. No motherfucker under the age of 50 has got a mortgage, at least the broader prospectus is their rate of home ownership is significantly lower than the over 50s, and so they weren't as particularly concerned about the Liz Truss stuff, and also they're mostly left-wing anyway. And that's the real issue here, is that millennials are not getting more right-wing as they age because they're not passing the point with which their views become solidified in their middle ages at a time when they have home ownership. They don't have capital to protect. They don't need to conserve anything. Why would they become conservative? It makes no sense. And that's why we're seeing the cohort of younger, more liberal voters or more left-leaning voters continually age higher and higher as these polls come out and as the older generations, but they unfortunately leave the electorate, shall we say.
Leave. That's very polite way of putting it. Yeah, people don't get conservative as they get older. It's like not a natural phenomenon. It is just when an economy works, you work hard, you get a house, and you feel like you have a stake in society, you're going to become more conservative because you become more comfortable, don't you? That is how generations have been for the last 60, 70 years, right? Because the post-war consensus work for people. Of course, we're the first generation where it hasn't worked. We're just responding to our material conditions, not because we're thicky, dumb, stupid leftists. Very good stuff. Let's go to our comments and bring in our producer, Lewis Aaron. I know we're going to have some great comments on this one. Yes. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can, yes. I love that's the go-to. It's like, can you hear me? Because we're still not like proper tech savvy. We don't know if we can hear each other or not.
I think I prefer the ruggedness of independent small media. Left, yeah. Really good show. People were very engaged in the comments today. However, we also got lots and lots of gifts that I just want to quickly go through because some of them are questions.
Okay.
But I want to jump in instead of doing my usual ramble at the beginning, which I'm already doing. Okay, moving on. So Jacqueline gifted a membership.
Sorry, Jim Speak said yes. Jim Speak said yes. I can hear you, Clem Fandango. To woo. Oh, sorry.
Thanks,
you just caught me off guard there.
We got Jacqueline and Michael gifting membership, so thank you so much. We also had sub join us as a member. And we also had Steve MC81 gifted 50 term left memberships.
Wow.
So 50. Thank you so much,
Steve. Thank you so much. Wow, incredible stuff. Really appreciate it.
50 gifties. I couldn't even read the comments because it was like gifted membership, comment, gifted membership, because there were just so many, and now I'm having to scroll all the way down to get to the next ones. Do you pronounce it? I always forget how to pronounce that.
I forget how to pronounce it. Yeah, do sex. Their sex.
It's a gaming thing, right? It's a gaming thing. Yeah. I don't know.
They must hate us so much because we keep.
I mean, it comes from Deus Ex Machina, which is a literary device. Essentially, I'm assuming it means God is the machine, which is it's a literary device in which someone creates a role or a character or a happenstance in a story that justifies itself, right? As in the story is meant to say a thing, and then it creates a situation that justifies it.
It's also an episode name on Lost, a show that everyone should watch.
Oh my God, you're obsessed with Lost. He always brings up Lost whenever he can.
I haven't brought it up for a while, to be fair.
It's also a really great song by the band Pure Reason Revolution. For those who like
Can't say I've ever heard of
there
them.
you go.
Right, I will have to push us on. So yeah, Melissa came a member. We even got 10 more off of this. I love this name. Antifa Vegan Boy gifted 10 memberships.
Thank you. This is a very generous crowd tonight.
I know, incredible. Okay, I'm going to scroll all the way back up to
last
millions.
night, to be fair, like they're probably just on the same hype train from last night.
Yeah, they stayed on for like 12 hours. Let's keep this hype train going on week in, week out. Go on to Helena, give her loads of money, and come back to us.
Right, okay, jumping on to donations and questions. So Steve as well gave £5.
Thank you, Steve, again.
Well, didn't ask the question, just made the statement. We need max wage laws. Watch how fast wages rise if CEOs can only earn 10 times the lowest wage in their org. I used to work at, I don't know if they still have the same rule, and it's not a proper co-op at all, but I used to work for John Lewis, Waitrose, but Waitrose John Lewis. And that was a rule that they had in the company where the CEO could only earn X amount more than the lowest paid person in the company. And yeah, obviously the CEO still earned loads of money, but comparatively to other, companies and stuff, it was much, much lower than, these big CEOs are raking in 5, 10, 15 million.
So the Greens have 20 to 1, or is that just public? Is it private as well, public? So I know the Corbyn manifesto was
private as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
But I think broadly, I mean, this is an issue that you're trying to paper over from an issue with capitalism. Whereas, of course, when it comes to Waitrose John Lewis, it's technically like partly a worker cooperative, and that's the reason why they impose those things upon themselves. If you had a socialist model where all businesses and all firms were worker owned, they would all have those things, because otherwise, why would anyone join the fucking cooperative in the first place?
I will, because we've got quite a few. We've got quite a few questions. Not really Rachel Atwood, as opposed to really Rachel Atwood, said levels of religiosity in the US vary tons by region. New England had its 17th century fundamentalist Christian phase, but then we grew out of it. But obviously, we'll come to some more questions around this. But why the Christians are so loud, right? Like, they're so fucking loud right now, and they are punching way above their weight. Like, these people are being platformed right now all over the place, when in actual fact they represent such a tiny, tiny minority in such ways. I also wanted to point out, what's her name? Who was the Talk TV host? Alex Phillips, is it?
Alex Phillips,
Just to remind everybody, in the Nathan Gill investigation, and technically they couldn't pursue any further prosecutions because of lack of evidence. Nathan Gill did tell his handler that she was on board for, putting out some Russian propaganda in the European Parliament. Just want to put that out there, just as a little side note. We're having a bit of a.
When you say these people,
go ahead, Helena.
When you say these people have a lot of prominence, when they have done so because a lot of the Conservative Party and the Reform UK Party's base are all bought into this stuff already, and as Curtis points out, they're engaging in the kind of hiding their power level. Like, that's the issue. There's a problem, and has been a problem in the Conservative Party for a very long time. Like, Owen Jones spoke to these kind of people at Conservative conference, openly talking about their ethno-nationalist views. Yep. This isn't uncommon, and a lot of these people are also in the pay of other states and other institutions like the Heritage Foundation. Isn't it weird that as soon as Robert Jenrick had his kind of weird right-wing renaissance, when he was always considered a kind of a one-nation Tory before 2023, 2024, was because he started adopting language that a lot of the American right used. A lot of American right have links to the Heritage Foundation. I'm not saying that Robert Jenrick is paid by the Heritage Foundation, but his rhetoric is very similar, and it all seems to happen all at the same time all of a sudden. You see people like Tommy Robinson just randomly making posts on Twitter, glazing the United Arab Emirates. Who have loads
when has he ever spoken about them? And then suddenly he's talking about it.
But yeah, those people in the far right in the UK they're really kind of positive about the UAE for some sort of reason. Or they talk about how Dubai is really good to moving to because it's a tax haven. Like, lots of these people all have viewpoints that have all kind of happened to have been prominent all at the same time very recently. And I will not say anything other than it seems like quite a coincidence that that's happened all organically.
I'll say something. There was an intelligence leak just a few weeks ago at intelligenceonline.com where they got a hold of a leaked document from the Abu Dhabi authorities which showed a working agreement with Visegrad 24, or however you correctly pronounce it, the big far right account on social media, saying that they were going to work together and that they were going to use a back channel to do it. And I just want to point out that after this agreement was made, which was last summer, both Visegrad, Tommy Robinson, and a bunch of other right-wing accounts all started talking about a lot of pro-UAE talking points, all at the same time, guys. It's just a massive coincidence, right? That and certain people have just been turning up in Dubai recently. I'm sure they're doing it for no other reason that they actually believe the stuff, right? That they actually really love talking about separatist groups in Yemen that are somehow backed by the UAE. They don't care. They're getting paid. I'll say it. Sue me.
I mean, what's important as well there is that this is all about broadly having a united front to ensure that Western nations not only support the UAE, but also support their new kind of pact with Israel and the United States to be able to strong arm Saudi Arabia so that UAE can have control of the Horn of Africa.
Yeah,
and just to point out as well, in the Epstein files, there's obviously a lot of people still going through them, but in part of the European interference that Bannon and Epstein were carrying out, they were pretty much going to the UAE pretty much every other month together. Just to point that out, but I'm sure more stuff will come out as people.
And Bin Zayed is in the Epstein files. The guy from Dubai Ports World was the one who sent the "I love the torture" video message. Like, these people are fucking all over the Epstein files.
Oh, my favorite one that I found the other night, I think I sent it to Curtis, where Mohammed bin Solomon emails Jeffrey Epstein about 3 or 4 hours after Fidel Castro dies, and says, "Oh, this opens up so many opportunities for me." Just saying. Anyway, we'll
and Michael, Lewis doesn't get any sleep, as you can tell.
Oh, I was up until 6 this morning, guys. I was up until 6. I can't get out of the files. Anyway, so some lovely comments at the beginning. Just want to point these out very quickly. Michael was saying, Curtis hosting, do I come back in 40 minutes?
Why am I always blamed for it? I'm always the one that's on time.
We've got Helena assemble. But I wanted to. I want to pick on one because we don't have time to go through all the comments that I would love to do. Which is, I want you to discuss. Where is it? There's too many comments that I liked because we have so many good ones. It was basically. There we go. Found it. I want you to discuss this. I know it comes up often, but I think it's interesting to talk about as a new party is emerging, about the idea of who we call a fascist. Is something fascistic? Where do people stand on the fascist kind of spectrum? And even though obviously ethno-nationalism is tied to fascism inherently, where do we place kind of where we're at right now with the emergence of this new party and how Reform are shaping themselves? And how would you apply the word fascism or fascistic to these people from Reform to the newer parties that are emerging? That's kind of the question I want to ask you both.
Well, I think that Reform UK is more of just a broadly nationalist party. I don't think there's an ethnic element to it. That's why you've got people like Layla Cunningham and Zia Youssef in higher positions, and why they're deliberately trying to distance themselves from people like Rupert Lowe, who I think are fascists, right? But there was a leaked source saying someone in Reform UK was calling Restore Britain neo-Nazi of all people, and Elon Musk is the one saying that Reform are the Nazis for not liking nationalist positions from Restore Britain. I think there are certainly kind of a mix of. There are some ethno-nationalists in Reform UK who are quite quiet about it. I think they broadly have what is a civic nationalist, or in some cases ultra-nationalist, even if it's not an ethno-nationalist viewpoint, right? But I think Nigel Farage would call himself a civic nationalist. But Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage openly said we had to get rid of him because he's too nationalistic. And I'm like, Rupert Lowe he's a real fucking weapon, isn't he?
He's a real fucking weapon. Yeah, I broadly agree. I think that there's a discussion of whether Farage and Reform are fascists. I know Zach Polanski openly said it. I think they're quite the fascist adjacent in the sense that they'll work with people who are probably fascist. There are definitely fascists inside Reform, but I think Helena's right insofar that it's broadly a civic nationalist party. It's something like Restore is extreme right, and I would happily say that Rupert Lowe is not just a fascist. I think he's a white supremacist. I think he is like you couldn't go further right in terms of his political ideology. Of course, once again, as to caveat that, what I said earlier is people are hiding their power level. So I do think that Nigel Farage is more radical than he lets on. I think you could probably look at some of his old statements or what he said in the past. Do I think he's as fascist as Rupert Lowe? No. Do I think he's as fascist as Elon Musk? Also no. It's also interesting that Layla Cunningham on GB News basically called Restore a Neo-Nazi Party, which prompted a lot of the backlash. And this is what I found quite interesting. And this is part of the, I mean, maybe genius is too much for a nice word to use. The cleverness of Farage is to moderate himself. And now he's got a far-right party, which he can kind of say, look, I'm actually the moderate here. Look at these guys. Now, whether it rebounds and actually people go, I actually feel like you're the gateway to that kind of politics, so this isn't good. Or whether people go, actually, I told you, Nigel Farage isn't a racist. These guys are racist. I'm not sure. Again, at the top of the show, electorally, I'm not worried about Restore. I'm worried about them shifting the Overton window. So do I think that Farage is a fascist? I don't think he is. Do I think Reform is an ethnic nationalist party? No. I think I agree with Helena. It's a civic nationalist party. But Restore, Rupert Lowe, these people, complete absolutely insane, extreme far right nut jobs.
I mean, I think that this is a similar kind of dynamic that we're having here on the left, where I think that the Green Party are being boosted because you have people like the Workers' Party of Britain or whatever, real kind of nut jobs in some cases, who are allowing more other left-wing parties to be able to treat them like they're the ones who are persona non grata. And again, that also moves the Overton window left as well. So your party and the Greens gain a lot from being able to disassociate themselves from the Workers' Party of Britain. To be fair, they stood down for the Greens to be able to beat Labour in Gorton and Denton, but I'm sorry, I am not a Green Party representative. I'm speaking in my own personal capacity as a YouTuber. I think you're full of nut jobs, sorry.
Well, I don't even think that people take the Workers' Party even that seriously. I don't think they're even noticed, if I'm honest. I mean, without George Galloway, they're not even electorally viable in particular seats. So in that sense, I think they are less, I don't know, less relevant than even Restore, maybe.
Yeah, I probably think so right now. Yeah, wait until another majority or high percentage Muslim constituency comes up again, and I'm sure he'll be all over it. But
even just regular community independents did far better than the Workers' Party did in Muslim communities, and I think because they actually represent the communities rather than the narrow political interests of George Galloway's ego, probably is easier for them to do well.
But it's, unfortunately, like as well, he's such a good orator. You can't deny it. He's really good
very
at messaging.
Good, yeah.
He's probably in that space. He's probably one of the best. He's very, very good, and I understand.
I wish there were more
drawn in.
I wish there were more Galloway rhetoricians on the left, though. Not obviously his viewpoints, but people that spoke like, because he is fucking fantastic at communicating and dealing with bullshit. I wish there was more people like him on the actual left, not whatever the Workers' Party is.
Yeah, but I was just going to say with the fascist thing, I feel like because words are sometimes used too much, I do think the word fascist is thrown around. I think instead of using it, I think you just need to tell a story which is reminiscent of fascism. Which is why sometimes when I'm talking to people, I don't just go for the word fascist. I'll be like, you only need to go back to the 1930s where the Daily Mail were putting out stories like, oh, isn't it a coincidence that crime's going up and all these Jewish people are coming here? They used terms like so-called refugees and stuff like that, referring to, Jewish people. So I think it's better to almost kind of build up a story of, going back to a certain periods of time rather than just throwing out a word. Because if you throw out a word and you can't provide emotion or story or examples with it, for me, it kind of means nothing. But yeah, and I just want to say a big thank you to... Go on.
This quote from Jamie Alice. Would you like me to be the cat?
Oh, God.
I still can't get if that actually fucking happened.
I still think about Kinga on a regular basis. If anyone remembers Kinga.
Oh my God, really? Wow, Kinga.
Oh,
that is an icon.
Makosi was the real icon from that series. Let's be real.
Well, she thought she was fucking pregnant after about 10
honestly, still
from
to this day.
She loved orange soda as well. Was that orange soda? No, was it what? No. Yeah,
I think Keenan and Kel.
No. It was Cherryade. She loved Cherryade. I love
anyway,
charity too.
I was obviously the previous comment. I just wanted to say a big thank you to obviously Kate for the £5 donation, and also Paul as well. Also donated £5 towards the end and said thanks for the live stream and of course for the support of Richard Murphy. Did we bring up Richard Murphy? Did I miss that bit? Was I in the comments at that point? Oh, of course. No, they're saying support. Oh, sorry, he's saying support Richard Murphy, who is another YouTuber who talked.
Because we were talking MMT before when we.
Okay. Anyway, that's it for the comments, guys. Thank you so much, and thank you to all the amazing gifts tonight, everybody.
Amazing, Lewis. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for the comments. Really generous show. I guess we're reeling from the hype train. So now I want you to give hundreds of pounds to Helena. I'm joking. You give what you can. There's no pressure. But a great show. And Helena, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
It's an absolute pleasure. As always. Great show today. Great show.
Yeah, really good show, actually. I was written kind of like under the weather. I was like, oh, are these stories going to fly? I think we had a great show. As always, please make sure you like and subscribe. Also hit the notification bell because so many people are not getting notifications that we go live. We've got a new video dropping. Of course, you can support us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. You can support us through Patreon, which is, I think, £3 or £5 per month, or there's the Ko-Fi or Coffee, I don't know how you pronounce it, which is a one-time contribution. We will, in the coming months, sort out a proper portal where instead of going through Patreon and Ko-Fi, you can give directly to us. That will be in the pipeline too. But I want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in. Fantastic show, fantastic viewers as always, and we will see you on Friday.